Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people who I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment, and today I'm happy to have with me, on kind of a somber note, I've got Kim Berley from the Stampeders here, and we are going to talk about Kim's memories of the recently passed Mel Shaw. So I'd like to, if it's okay with you, Kim, I would like to read what you stated on behalf of the Stampeders on January 21st. To quote you, Kim, "Just a few hours ago, we heard of the passing of Mel Shaw. I write this with tears in my eyes. To Rich, Ronnie, and me, Mel was our North Star. He inspired us to believe in ourselves and guided us through the entire first phase of our career. He was a mentor, a big brother, a manager, and a friend. As he was to us, so he was to a legion of other young hopeful musicians. He was much loved. Carry on, dear Mel. See you around." So that is quite touching. And I know that Mel, as you say in that statement, guided you through the entire first phase of your career. But what I wasn't aware of before I saw some of your recent posts is just how much of a connection you had with Mel early on. So why don't you expand on how things happened with you and Mel and then with the Stampeders?
Well, yeah, I had only been drumming for like a year. I started drumming when I was 15 in the summertime, just around my birthday, and that's when I got my first set of drums. And a year later, I was in like a month later, I was in a band. And a year later, we were a band that has been working a bit around Calgary. And when I say a bit, I mean a bit. We probably had 4 or 5 gigs over that first year together. But Mel was the talent coordinator on a Saturday afternoon dance show in Calgary called Guys and Dolls. And the band that was on that show got all the work because they had this high-profile gig. And Mel, I didn't know much about Mel Shaw at the time, except that that's what he did. And he would come on every week and talk about what was going on as far as like dances in Calgary. And in Calgary at the time, it was basically there was no booze allowed at any kind of public event. And if you had entertainment, there were no clubs with entertainment because music and entertainment were just not allowed to happen together. It was it was an extremely conservative city in 1960. I guess it would have been 1963 or 4 when I was starting my drumming. Anyway, we thought, my older brother and I, he was like 6 years older than me and had a job and a car and all the things that you need to have a band. And so we thought we'd try and meet Mel Shaw. So we went out to a dance that was being played by one of his bands, which Ronnie was in. Ronnie King was in that band. And, we saw him there and everything, but we never had the nerve to go up and talk to him. So anyway, my brother did call him up, but they got together over a car repair issue, which my older brother was capable of. So he decided, and the band, which was called the Paintbrushes, and Mel was always he was really image conscious. He knew that bands just couldn't get up and play and look like everybody else or look like the Beatles or anything like that. They had to have something unique. Like Paul Revere and the Raiders. They wore their revolutionary costumes sort of thing. And so his bands always had stuff like that, and the Paintbrushes had really colorful stuff, and they employed a black light, which was really a new device. So he had some kind of idea for everything. And anyway, when we connected with him, and he came down to rehearsal to check out the band and see what we were all about, he basically told us that we were playing the wrong music. We were still in that Fireballs Ventures guitar instrumental band, right? And he said, you have to sing. And my older brother was a vocalist, and he did sing a little bit. But the thing about Mel was he had this whole plan about how to get a band famous. And he had come to the realization that you never become famous locally by being local. You need to come from somewhere else. And in Canada at that time, people may find this hard to believe now, or younger people anyway, but Canadian media had zero interest in Canadian artists. No matter what you were, an actor, a vocalist, a Broadway singer, a musician, no matter what you were, you only got national exposure in Canada if you left the country, like Paul Anka did. And there were a few others, the Four Lads and singing groups like that. They all went to New York and made it there, and then they were received back in Canada as U.S. bona fide stars, which is what you had to have to get on the radio in Canada. There were no studios in Canada. There was no place to record. So Mel's plan was to get us to England, which was exploding in 1964, right? Everything was coming from England. And the thing was, we could go to England, and if we cracked off a hit record in England, well, certainly it would reflect back to Canada and be a hit here and probably in the United States. Even if we didn't really get successful, just the fact that we'd gone to England and been there and played there and everything would give us a much higher profile, even if we just came back to Calgary.
You could use that in your promo. That would have been great promo for you guys, just returning from their successful tour of England, the Stampeders.
Yeah. But even more specific and more important to me at that particular age and time was I had never met anybody who said, you can be a professional musician. This is a life. You can do this. You can be a star.
Well, there wasn't anything going on in Calgary at all for
No, nothing. They rolled up the streets at 6 o'clock. I mean, it was a very staid community. Yeah, so much has changed. That was his great strength. He was a true believer. He really felt that he could make things happen.
Now, I get the sense that he was kind of living vicariously through you guys too, because didn't he started out trying to have his own career as a singer?
Yeah. Well, he did. And he released a song, and it got some radio play, and it got him a little tour in the northwestern U.S. with an American singer. And so, this clued him into how the business worked, and he was very curious about it. And he set up his own label, and he did all these things that nobody else in Calgary was even doing. And he kind of made a living. He published this little chart with the top 20 and what was going on in Calgary. He either created or became instrumental in that TV show. And then, so all his bands, because he had this promotional thing, and plus he was, he always had the latest in 8x10s. He was always doing something. The Stampeders spent a ton of money on promotion. Back in the days when we were hardly making any money at all, that really could have used that promotional money for bread. We always had to kick back close to half of our income for promotional material.
And Mel Shaw was very image focused. It was important to him for you guys to have a unique look, I think. I remember when I first saw you guys in concert way back, probably around 71, 72, thinking that you guys really looked different, in the colorful outfits and the whole thing. And as I was watching Rich Dodson play, he had that really cool double-neck Fender electric guitar. I'd never seen anything like that before.
He had an Esquire on the bottom, which was a precursor to the Telecaster,
right?
A single pickup Tele, and then a Fender 12-string. And he and Pete Traynor from Traynor Amplifiers, who was just kind of breaking out in Toronto at the time, they went to Pete's shop, and they took a table saw and they cut the top off the Esquire and the bottom off the 12-string and pegged and glued them together. They have never come apart.
I wondered if maybe Mel being so image focused had anything to do with that idea, but sounds like maybe not.
No, that was not a Mel thing. That was Rich. Mel was business, and he produced our records in the sense that he got us in the studio. And ultimately, final decisions were his, but really the band and the engineers did more of the, we worked with the sound. Mel would hear something and like it or not like it, but he had no technical understanding whatsoever. And so he simply didn't participate in that part of it. But he was a good manager. He had the ability to, he reached out, he called people. And this whole idea that we would go to England and break out of there, it's what got us to Toronto, because we couldn't get the money together to go to England. But the Big Land Agency, which was a Toronto agency that had big ideas, called itself the Big Land for good reason. The agent Ron Scribner wanted to make a national agency that booked basically Canadian bands coast to coast. That was a really, really new idea. That was in 1966. And so Mel was in touch with him, and he made a trip across the country looking for bands to add to their roster. And Mel sold them on the Stampeders. He came out to see us, and he thought the whole thing was once again, it was a unique thing. All the other bands were looking like any other number of bands.
They're all trying to look like the Beatles.
Rubbed on the English look, the Beatles look was what everybody was doing. We didn't do that, and so it was something different and something to sell, and that's basically that's what Mel did. He created an image.
You couldn't get much different back then than what it was with 6 guys playing rock and roll in cowboy outfits.
That was it. That was it. And his slogan was "Rock with a kick under a cowboy hat."
Yeah, now,
you know,
something else I think that not a lot of fans of the Stampeders are probably aware of the fact that you weren't signed by RCA or Capitol or anything like that, but Mel created his own label.
yeah, yeah. In Canada, we were on his label, which was called MWC for Music World Creations. But we leased it. It only became possible to distribute nationally because we leased it to Quality Records, which was their business. They were a record company, and there were songs out on the Quality label. They almost all began on other labels, and when they came to Canada, they were put out as Quality. They were mostly a pressing plant, but they did have the distribution network. They distributed almost all the vinyl records in Canada. They were the biggest by far. And so he did a deal with them to distribute and press and promote. And we became their first Canadian success story. The world changed when we did that deal. And also the world changed when the content regulations came into play in 1970. And we got on the radio with Carry Me. And before that, the only radio you were going to get in Canada was mom and pop stations in secondary markets who were open to giving something a shot and then letting people hear some Canadian talent. And there were Canadians out there that actually wanted to hear some Canadian music, which the people in radio simply didn't believe. And they had it cushy. The people in radio, they were taking all this free stuff coming from the United States that cost them nothing and putting it out and reaping the rewards, And I'm glad they did. I mean, all that music was great and everything from everywhere else. But clearly there were Canadians who were capable of making good music but weren't given an opportunity unless they could gin themselves up to leave everything, back up and go to New York or LA or Nashville if you were a country singer. And so, Mel thought, well, London is the hot spot now. Let's go to London. And, there are many stories. The quest for $10,000, that's what we figured it was going to cost us to get over there and live until we could start working. And he'd contacted an agent over there who said, I'll book this. But we never could raise enough money. We were all poor boys. We were all from working class families. And Mel's dad, I guess, he wasn't well off, but he had a little bit of money, but he was not interested in squandering it on a rock and roll band going to London.
No kidding. Yeah. Did you guys ever in your career make it over to England?
We did. A few times, in fact, in Europe. We did a couple of tours of Europe, and then we were breaking out. We had record deals in all of those countries. And we got, with the Dave Clark Five, covered Sweet City Woman in England, and they ended up getting more airplay than we did on it. So we got kind of, our big hit got slipped out from under us by the Dave Clark Five of all people,
No kidding, yeah. Wow. I'm going to have to search that one out. That's.
Yeah, it's not nearly as good as ours. That's the funny thing. It's a kind of, and it wasn't a big hit even for the Dave Clark Five in England. I think if ours had gotten a better shot, we may well have had a better shot. But we got played on, different cuts. And so we did a couple of tours of Europe, and we got to England, we got to London and Edinburgh and Manchester, and did a little tour of England in a couple of little vans with the three of us and Mel and our two roadies at the time. It was fabulous, I mean, you love these things, and we were all in our early 20s. It was a hell of a time.
Yeah, no kidding.
But Mel was always there.
Mel was always there, and Mel got you guys started out on the road too, right? And didn't it happen that was it 66 or thereabouts that Mel put the 6-piece band along with his wife and kids in an old beat-up Cadillac with an exhaust leak and drive you guys from Calgary all the way to North Bay?
Yep, he did. That was our move to Toronto. And the thing is, the agent in Toronto, they lined up the summer's worth of work, July and August, in Ontario, some clubs, some beach pavilions. That was a big deal in Ontario. Well, you're in Ontario, and a few teen dances. They even, because the drinking age was 21 back then, there were actually teen dances that would hire bands and things. So yeah, we had a summer full of that, but we had no intention of ever coming back. So we loaded up a U-Haul and got this old Cadillac for $700, which was, $3,500 in today's money, I guess. It was a 57, so it was 9 years old at the time. And we didn't know it when we set out. It was a pretty nice looking car. You got a limousine here. This is a big deal. And we bought it from Imperial Oil except I'm sure that it started out as a funeral car because it was deep purple inside. The interior was all plush purple, and it had a big back seat and two jump seats that pulled down, which I sat on for the entire duration of that car because I was the smallest guy in the band, and that's what I got, the jump seat.
Let's get the drummer all cramped up by the time we get to North Bay.
Yeah. But basically, this thing, the exhaust, there were two big holes in the rusted out wheel wells on the back wheels, and there was a big hole in the tailpipe just behind the muffler. And we had big old winter tires with studs on them, which just fanned this exhaust right into the back seat. And we didn't discover it until we were, halfway to Regina, and we couldn't figure out where this exhaust smell was coming from. And it wasn't coming into the front because Mel had the window up for him and his wife and two kids. And they were little kids, right? One was maybe less than a year, or maybe a year old, and his son was maybe 3 years old or 4 years old. And they would sleep on his wife's lap or between the two of them. I mean, the seats in a big old Cadillac are pretty damn wide, so there was room for the kids to sleep. And Mel drove all the way from Regina to North Bay, and we'd stop for food and gas and nothing else. And we made it to this hotel in North Bay at about 9:15. We were supposed to be on stage at 9. And we phoned ahead. We told them about that, but
I want to point out for people that are from my hometown of North Bay that it was the Blue Spruce Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
And that place has been notorious for years. In fact, they're still talking about it on one of those groups, you're from North Bay when, whatever. So yeah, the Blue Spruce, your very first gig with the Stampeders.
And you were in a Toronto band in the 60s, if you know the Blue Spruce, because absolutely everybody played there. And then because for people from North Bay, it was a dry town at that time, and the Blue Spruce was just outside the town limit, which was about 5 or 6 miles. And so there it was out in the woods by the side of the highway. And we had been told that this was a resort. So I'm thinking Elvis is fun in Acapulco, And so we drive up to this gravel parking lot, an old white and blue ancient hotel with a really big bar and lots of trucks rumbling by on Highway 11. And it just, it was, I was surprised to find that it wasn't what Mel had kind of told us it would be, but of course he didn't know what it was either. None of us had any idea. But, it got us to Ontario, and we worked for 5 years doing the circuit and playing various one-nighters and whatever we could get, before something broke out. But we always had something going. We didn't just play the clubs. We always had a new record, or didn't always have a new record, but whenever we could afford to get in the studio, we'd get in and record something. And Mel would release it on his label, and we'd mail it across the country, and we'd do little promotional tapes. We'd say, this is so-and-so from the Stampeders, and you're listening to, CK whatever. And so he kept us always engaged, and that helped us to believe that something was happening, that we could make it. And the fact that we just always made records, and we always had new promotion, we were always taking pictures. We made little 16 millimeter films, and we just did everything. He was ahead of his time when it came to the films, because some of the stuff we did on film actually ended up years later on Much Music or MTV. And that wasn't done on video. That was before video.
Right. Now, I was curious about that. The trip from Calgary to North Bay, is there any 16 millimeter footage of that?
Oh, hell no.
No.
We were entirely too... I'm writing my memoir. That's the piece I saw on Facebook was a bit of that. It's very cool to be thinking back and remembering all of this stuff and putting it down. And the fact that I still remember it also clearly is evidence. These were major impressions on me, because by the time we left in 66, I had my 18th birthday when we got to the Blue Spruce. And the drinking age was 21, and I looked 12. And so, so I never hung around the bar. I'd be in for the set and immediately out. And Mel was on the road with us for the first couple of months, and then he got rented a little basement apartment in the city of Toronto, and lived there for that whole basic period until we finally broke out and made a bit of dough, and he could get himself a better place to live, which was true of all of us. We were all in basically rooming houses or a room and kitchen. It was a very
lean time.
Yeah. Lean time, yeah.
Well, one of my favorite memories of the Stampeders was, I don't know where I saw or heard it, but It was about the Junos and how you guys never had any money, but you wanted to arrive in style. So I think, did you take a bus or the cab, and then you got out and got into a limo around the corner from the, from the event center, and so you could arrive in style at the Junos in a limo, but nobody could really afford to pay for it.
By the time we were going to the Junos, we were actually winning. Like that was the Sweet City Woman year, and we did actually rent a limousine to arrive in. What you're thinking of is a few years later when we did a TV special, and there was I think it was a TV record album, like a compilation album that was coming out. I think it was up at Global, and they were making. So we did this little half-hour special, and we had everybody show up. You know, all the Ian Thomas and every other Canadian musician who was getting notorious at that particular time. And this was Mel's idea, of course. He wanted to show them all arriving, but he wanted to have them in a limousine. So they basically waited and took turns as the limousine went around the parking lot and picked them up and took them back and dropped them off. And the only guys who wouldn't do that was Kelly J and Drake Godovich, who arrived in a convertible red Volkswagen, which was the highlight.
I love it, yeah. So do you have a favorite memory of Mel?
Oh, God. I don't know that I have a favorite memory of Mel. I have, you know, I was his, when he brought this whole idea forth. I mean, I was the youngest in the band, and Richard was the only other teenager. Ronnie was not in the early band. And these other three guys were in their mid-20s. So when he brought up the idea of making it and going to England, well, I mean, I fell in line instantly. I mean, it was like, you know, I thought, wow. Whatever this guy has, I want, and so you know we became pretty close. I became like a little brother to him, and he was definitely a mentor to me as far as you know. We would talk endlessly about the music business, and he was very forthcoming. I mean, he would tell you what he knew and what he thought, and sometimes we'd find out that maybe he, you know, what he didn't know would become apparent. But he was just an inspiring guy. And he was always positive. Never see Mel get in the dumps. He would have the occasional migraine when he was out on the road. So he was taking a lot of stress, you know, because he put his family out there on a line. And either this thing had to work or they were going to be in trouble. And he kept he maintained this very positive outlook. Anytime you phoned him, he was going to be up and tell you what was going on. And he always had, you know, the thing we do when we phoned Mel, all of us, we'd say, "Hey, Mel, what's new?" Well, it was always something new. He was just constantly thinking about how to make this work. And if one thing didn't work, well, we went on to the next. And he did the promotional material himself. He went and bought letter set, which is sheets of letters. This is, you know, the time we were living in, and a little X-Acto knife, and he would cut out letters and set the type and, you know, trim the pictures, the whole thing, and take it to the printer. So he spent time doing that. He was also always he was phoning all the record companies in New York for years before we finally had something that tweaked their ear, you know, and that they thought was a hit. And it was. That would have been Sweet City Woman. And it just went like wildfire. I mean, it was released maybe in mid-June, and by mid-July, it was getting played everywhere. And by the end of July, it was on WABC, which played 20 songs. That was their entire playlist. Honed down pop music to its finest point, right? And so we were driving in this little car. The old smoker had long since died, and we'd been through a few cars, and we were renting rent-a-wreck vans and all kinds of stuff like that. And with Richard had met a new girl who worked at Quality Records, who subsequently became his wife, and they're still married. My God! But she had a little yellow Camaro, so the three of us and she are crammed into this little car, and we're driving at night. We were down in Eastern Ontario, and we're turning the knob on the radio to try and hear faraway stations, and we knew that WABC was the one to try and listen to, and we'd heard a rumor that we were getting played on WABC, and this is the kind of strange synchronicity of things. I mean, we're driving in the night, all of a sudden, as the dial is turning, we hear WABC, you know, their chorus singing that. And immediately afterwards, the banjo intro to Sweet City Woman came on. So we didn't have to listen to them even through a song. We hit it, the song came on. We pulled the car over and just, you know, we were on some secondary road in the dark. And just got out and whooped and yelled and let off our youthful energy because we were, we had it made. At least we thought we did, by being one of the 20 songs played on the biggest radio station in the world.
Yeah, so, I know from my personal experience. Now, I've never had any major hits or anything like that, but the first time I heard myself on the radio, it was something else, and that is quite a feeling. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mel,
it's a rush.
Mel Shaw, we have to thank. All of us Stampeders fans have Mel Shaw to thank for all of the wonderful music. And listen, Kim, I want to thank you once again for taking the time out of your busy day to, in this case, pay tribute to Mel Shaw. Rest in peace, Mel, and thanks for everything. And to you, Kim, I say, until next time, cheers.
Okay, Tommy, thanks a lot, man.
It is always a treat for me to talk with Kim Berley from the Stampeders. Now, as it happened, after we recorded this chat, I checked out Kim's weekly chat and song that he posts on his Facebook page, and he had some things to say about Mel Shaw that I thought we should probably include in the outro here. To be followed by Kim singing one of the classic Stampeders hits, Carry Me. Enjoy.
Well, hello, my friends. As you all know who have been following my posts on Facebook, Mel Shaw has died, and Mel was one of the most influential people in my life. I wouldn't be sitting here doing this if I had not met Mel. So his passing was, when somebody passes who you love, you weep, you lament their passing for a little while, but really, I don't grieve over someone who's lived a full life and essentially has left it at 82 years of age. I don't grieve Mel now. I'm speaking about him to remember a job well done, a life well lived. Here was a man who, above all else, was almost always positive. No matter what was going on in his life, he never passed that along to other people. Such a positive guy, and he had such a great sense of humor, and he laughed so much. That was his gift to me, along with, all the practical aspects of life, such as being a manager and telling me that I could do this, that I could be a musician, and that I could be a rock star, that it was possible. And believe me, in Calgary or anywhere else in Canada, I would think in the early 60s, there weren't many people telling you that. And to have somebody say, yeah, well, he didn't think it unusual or a crazy dream. He just thought it was how it was going to be. And so for all of that, I thank him, and I remember him with so much love. A little lump in my throat, but just appreciation for the part he played in my life. And he will be remembered lovingly forever. These tears are joyful, and these memories are too. So I just wish him, well, I know he's fine. That's my particular choice of beliefs in this world, and we all have our choice of beliefs. So, thank you, Mel. I know he's at peace, and I know he exists, you see. That's the other thing.
So yeah, that last little bit was from Kim's Facebook weekly video that he does on his Facebook page that he calls Chat and a Song, and he has a lot of insightful things to say. And when I heard last week's bit, I thought, you know what, we need to include that at the end of this show. And by the way, you can reach me if you have any suggestions or ideas for future guests on the show at tsoloband@gmail.com. Now here is Kim along with the Stampeders as he is featured on drums and lead vocals singing one of their biggest hits, Carry Me.
Carry me home to Birmingham, to my Sarah Ann, to where I grew a man. Carry me away from this old war. I don't want to fight no more.
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including guest acquisition, recording, editing, and so on. And hey, if you like the show, why not subscribe and help support us through Patreon at patreon.com/TommySolo. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn. All rights reserved. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening, and until next time, cheers.